Hello, this is Gary Aldridge with Aldridge Valuation Advisors, or AVA. And so AVA teaches business owners how to build and sell their business for more value. AVA also teaches business owners how to impact lives, because after all, life is more than just about making money, but it's about the lives that we impact along the way. Today we got a special guest, Dr. Richard Pratt. Richard is president and co-founder of Thirdmill Ministries. He served as professor of Old Testament at Reformed Theological Seminary more than 20 years and was chair of the Old Testament department. An ordained minister, Dr. Pratt travels extensively to evangelize and teach. He studied at Westminster Theological Seminary, received his master's in divinity from Union Theological Seminary, earned his doctorate in theology from in Old Testament studies from Harvard University. Dr. Pratt's the general editor of the NIV Spirit of the Reformation Study Bible. I need to get a copy of that. Translator for the New Living Translation, and has authored numerous articles, books, and commentaries. So welcome, Dr. Pratt. We really appreciate you coming today.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, you do need to get a copy of that Bible.
I do.
You're a good man. Thanks for having me.
My Bible has a lot of duct tape around it because I've had it a long time, but all it means is at least I have used it.
That's right.
But I did need to get a copy of it. So thank you so much for coming. Besides all the accolades that I read off, tell us a little bit about Richard Pratt. And before we get into Thirdmill, just tell us a little bit about you and what you do when you're not teaching and preaching and editing and authoring and impacting lives around the world.
Well, that's easy. Sleeping. No. My wife and Gina and I have been married. We celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary just 2 years ago. So wow. We've been married for 52 years. That's pretty good for a 45-year-old, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. That's amazing how you pull that off, but miracles happen.
We have a daughter and 3 wonderful grandchildren. Gina and I split our time between Orlando, Florida, which is where the Thirdmill offices are, or Jackson, Mississippi, which is where our daughter and grandchildren are. So we go back and forth. We've run that road a lot, and we've also flown those flights a lot. And so that's what we do with our lives.
That's great. That's great. Well, tell us a little bit about Thirdmill and what is it and what does it do? How did it get started?
Great. We started in 1998, incorporated in 1998. And maybe I can unpack it just a little bit by saying, why are we called Thirdmill or Third Millennium Ministries? That's the legal term, the legal name of the organization. 501c3, a normal sort of nonprofit, religious nonprofit. Why Third Millennium? A lot of people don't know this. They just don't realize. They never think about it. But in 2001, we entered into the third Christian millennium. And so it was, the first 1,000 years after Christ is the first millennium, then up to the year 2000 is the second millennium, then up to from 2001 forward, that's the third millennium. And we started in 98, so we had to come up with some kind of cool name. We thought third millennium would be obscure enough that nobody would know what it meant, but at the same time want to know why. But there was another reason, maybe it's even more important than that. And that is that we believed, and I think it's proven to be true, that the third Christian millennium is going to be the best millennium yet.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, what makes you say that?
Yeah, that's great. That's a great question. A lot of people don't feel that way, especially if you're a follower of Christ and you're living in the West, you're living in North America or Western Europe, you're sort of saying, wait a minute, Christianity seems to be dying. And I got it. It does seem to be dying, and in many ways it is. But the reality is that in the third Christian millennium, there are more followers of Jesus in the world than there have ever been in the history of the world.
Wow.
By the billions.
That's amazing.
Yeah, by the billions. I mean, just to
That's
give you
amazing.
An example, Africa, if the Lord keeps doing what he has been doing the last 25 years for the next 25 years, in other words, by 2050, there are going to be over 1 billion professing Christians in Africa alone.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah.
Then nearly 1 billion in Asia, and then almost 1 billion in Latin America as well.
Wow.
So while it's going down in this part of the world, it's exploding in other parts of the world. And so just believing that Christianity is growing, and that's one reason why we like the word Third Millennium Ministries. The second one is that there are more Christians living in more places than ever before. And a lot of people don't realize that either. There's hardly a place on earth where you cannot find a Christian witness somehow.
Yeah.
And that's a remarkable thing when you think about how little it started with Jesus and his disciples. And then in 2,000 years, we're almost everywhere.
You know, I think sometimes in the U.S., we think that the rest of the world is just like us, but we only represent about 5% or less of the world's population. So 95% or more of the world's population does not act and live and breathe like we do. It's very different. Yeah.
And while we might say, in our own country, that the church or Christianity is not doing so well numerically, or maybe even you might say spiritually or morally, it's going great guns in other parts of the world. Not everywhere. It's not perfect, but it's going great guns. It really is, especially in Africa. That's number one. And second is Asia. And then number three is Latin America. And unfortunately, North America is at the bottom of the list for the growing church, is even below Western Europe, for example. And so it's a sad story for my home, but it's a happy story out there. But there's but Thirdmill doesn't focus on evangelism per se. What we focus on is leadership development for the church. Okay, why would you do that? Well, it's because the church has grown so fast in those parts of the world, Africa, Asia, Latin America. It's grown so fast in those places that we've missed keeping up with the development of leaders.
So how do you address that?
Yeah, we address it by reaching out to them and by making education in the Bible and in sound Christian teaching available to everybody in the whole world. It's really that simple.
Wow, that's amazing.
I wish I could say I was the founder of Thirdmill. I'm the co-founder. I think you read it right from the piece of paper there. Yeah. And that's because I was really challenged by a friend in Mississippi, in fact, a former student, to start this ministry. And she said to me one day after having a dramatic experience with an African student who had come to the States to go to seminary, who lost his child and saw his child's dead body on Time magazine, on the cover of Time magazine.
Wow.
That's how he learned about it. She calls me up on the phone and she says, we've got to stop bringing students from the rest of the world here. And I said, well, what do you want to do about it? She said, I want to put seminary in a box and send it to them.
Wow. Okay.
Now, this is in 1996, 97. And I said, well, where do you want to send it? And she said, everywhere. Well, how many do you want to send it to? And she said, all of them.
Right.
And then the faithful words she said to me were these. She said, hey, if I can get the money, can you get the box?
Wow.
Now, I don't know I don't know where you're from, but in this part of the world, if the matriarch of a big farm asks you a question like that, you only have one response.
That's right.
Okay. And the one response was the one I gave. Yes, ma'am, I can do that.
Yeah. Well, I know that lady, and we're from the same part of the world. We're both from central Mississippi. So
well, you know her, and you can't say anything but yes.
That's right. There's only one answer. There's no second answer to that.
There's no second answer, no option. So that's how we really got started. And it was because if you can think of the church growing so rapidly in terms of just basic numbers of converts and followers of Christ in general, but we haven't poured our resources as we need to into the development of church leaders. There are good things going on out there. Don't misunderstand me, please. I don't want anyone to have false impression. There are Bible schools. There are even seminaries and colleges and universities in most of the places that I've mentioned here. Again, Africa, Asia, and Latin America. But there's just not enough, not even close to enough.
Right.
And so the results of that lack of training for the leaders is unimaginable for most people who live where you and I live. It's just unimaginable. I mean, what difference does it make? Because we just assume that Christian leaders have high education and they're skilled and they're spiritual people and things like that. But the reality is out there in the world, out there where the church is growing the fastest, there's the least opportunity for Christian leaders to learn the scriptures, and they don't know the scriptures very well by and large, and it leads to all kinds of horrible, horrible things in the body of Christ. And so it was after 10 years of traveling a lot, my wife and me, to teach in other parts of the world, I was a seminary professor, which was not a real job, so we could take a lot of time off and travel and teach. And it was after experiencing that and seeing it firsthand, what the condition of the church was, though big and growing, weak and unstable, and in fact horrific in some respects, because the leaders of the church didn't know any better. They flat out did not know any better. And so after that kind of experience, when Miss Janie's words to me, if I can get the money, can you get the box? Well, that rang true for me.
Yeah.
It needs to be done. Yeah.
Now, some of the points, and I got this off your website at thirdmill.org, some of the problems or some of the data points that kind of summarize the problem is, it's expensive to bring someone from over there, wherever there is, to the U.S., house them, feed them, train them for 3 years, and then they don't want to go back home because it's more comfortable and convenient here. And the flip side of that is true, where it's expensive to send someone from over here over there. Yes. It may take 5 or 10 years to learn the language and acclimate to the culture, and you're still not one of them. You're there, but not part of them, right? Mm-hmm. And then they don't want to stay there either. They want to come back home to the U.S. because it's more comfortable and convenient.
Yeah.
So what better way to solve that problem? If think about it in business terms, the problem is trying to get that training out there, and you do it for free. So Thirdmill developed all that and sends it out for free to the world. And since you opened up, which is probably 27 years ago, how many church leaders would you estimate that you've trained in that 27 years?
Well, we have good numbers. From the year 2010, though we started in 1998, our data was corrupted, and even Amazon couldn't recover it. So I said, can we start at 2010? And they said, yeah, we can. So the last 14 years, basically, we can honestly say to you that we have the records of having met the needs, or we're continuing to meet the needs of, about slightly over 2 million students around the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Imagine that.
In 176 countries and 23 languages.
I doubt there's any seminary or all of the seminaries combined in the U.S. that could say they've trained 2 million church leaders in the past 14 years.
Yeah, the average seminary in this country graduates less than 125 people a year.
Wow. And most of them stay here in the U.S.
And a third of them never go into ministry, for example. Yeah,
well, one of my cheap ways for me to travel, back in the day when you were professor at Reformed Theological Seminary and I was working in the back office doing accounting work, there were 40 or so students from around the world that would come to Jackson, Mississippi to study missions and get trained and then go. And so I would travel through them. I lived through them, and I was able to talk to people from Southeast Asia and Africa and Sri Lanka. And it was a wonderful way for me to try to get out of my little bubble of Northeast Jackson, so to speak, and travel around the world through other people.
Yeah, right, exactly. I said 2 million. Now that doesn't count people that come to our website. We don't count them. We don't count the people that watch us on television. I mean, for example, just to give you an example of that, we are broadcast. I know this is going to be hard to believe, but we're broadcast 24 hours a day, 7 days a week without a break for the last 12 years in Indonesia. Okay. So we're talking about hundreds of millions of people that watch us on TV and come to the website or hear us on radio, that kind of thing. We're not counting them. These are bona fide students, and they can't even get into our count unless they've already done at least 6, what we would call 6 credit hours.
Wow.
Like 2 courses. We don't even count them until then.
Yeah.
And so, it's it goes well, but I can tell you the truth. I mean, it's simply because the need is so great.
Just running through some math in my head, I'm a numbers geek, if nothing else. If those 2 million leaders over the past 14, 15 years have touched the lives of, let's just say, 1,000 people over 15 years, that's 2 billion people, 2 billion lives that you have touched in the last 14, 15 years. That's amazing.
Yeah,
absolutely amazing.
You can even break it down even smaller than that, and it's unbelievable. If you take 2 million and you say, in a lifetime, one of these church leaders will will touch the life of 100 people. Let's just say that.
Right.
Within the time of his career, 100 people. Because a lot are, on average, that's probably about right. Some are big churches, some are teeny little village things. So maybe 100 people in a lifetime. Well, take that, 2 million times 100.
Right.
The numbers are enormous.
Right. 200 million people. Yeah.
See, and that's what's different about Third Mill. We began with this, with one of our early sort of talking points was to say this. One of Coca-Cola's earliest slogans, Coca-Cola, was never more than a mile away.
Yeah.
Okay? They had a saturation model. They wanted global saturation.
Right.
And that's what Third Mill wants. And it's not as if everybody's going to want to use Third Mill. Of course they're not. I mean, of course. But just like when you go into the 7-Eleven or the Circle K store, and if you want a Dr. Pepper, you've got to walk past something to get to Dr. Pepper. And you know what it is? Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola.
Okay? So there it is. We know, Third Mill is not for every single human being or even every single church leader out there. That's fine. That's fine. But we don't want them to not know about it and it be available to them.
And I think your website also says this, you may have mentioned it already, but I'm going to repeat it anyways, that on average, church leaders around the world have had about 1 hour of training.
Yeah. That's what the experts say.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert in this. You know what an expert is. See, somebody says what you want them to say, and then you repeat it, right? But that's what the experts say. Believe me, there are people who are experts at this and who have good numbers on it. But 2 million sounds like a lot, except that if those projections of how the church is going to grow between now and 2050 are true, even close to true, the need is going to be for there to be 12 million more new pastors trained to meet the need.
That's 12 million in addition to what we already have today. Man, that's amazing. When you talk about 2 million, because I live in Metro Nashville, there's almost not quite 2 million people here. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of people. I can see them in traffic every day. But that's just amazing. You need an additional 12 million. Now, the cost of bringing 12 million people over here for training is just, I can't do that in my head. That's a lot of money.
You just could not do it. It's around, in terms of kingdom dollars, it doesn't cost a particular individual. It's around $100,000 to get somebody through a seminary program if they live a life of impoverishment and that kind of thing. It's at least $100,000, and maybe at 150.
Wow.
It just depends on how large their family is and what kind of housing they have. Things like that.
I believe it. Yeah.
So you can take the numbers, multiply that 150,000 times 12 million. I can't do that in my head.
It's a big number.
It's a big number.
It's a big number.
Assume.
Well, tell me some of the highlights of 24. Since we're in January, we'll do a post review and then we'll look ahead. But tell me about 24. What were some of the highlights of the things that stand out to you about Third Mill?
Right. One of the great things is we broke the 2 million mark in 2024.
Wow.
It just happened. We do 2 reports a year on numbers, and that was the report from last June, end of June. Our fiscal year runs July to June, so they do it in June, and then they do it in December, end of December. So we're up for a new one. So we grow about 200 to 225 a year, 200,000, 225,000 a year. That's on about the average. So we'll have to see what this number is. They're very careful, the counters. Miss Janie and I took a holy vow at the very beginning that we would never knowingly exaggerate anything about Third Mill. We would never speak evangelistically and sort of stretch the truth. There's no reason to stretch the truth. If I had to tell you it was 50,000, I would still be, whoa, that's unbelievable.
That's a huge number. That's a lot of lives impacted because it's not just the leaders, but it's the people the leaders impact.
Right, but you can say 2 million and you can say it with a straight face and know that the number is actually larger than that. That's a good thing. So that's one thing. Breaking the 2 million mark is big. I think another big thing that's happened for us is just in the last couple of years, because nothing that we do ever just happens in 1 year, okay? Because you can understand the process is you have to go from translating lectures or lessons and then producing the lessons, then getting the lessons there, then implementing it and creating the learning communities and things like that. So it's a long process when you start at nothing to get something going. But I would say in 2024, one of the highlights has been the country of India. India is going so well, it's mind-boggling. We actually have 2 full-time staff people, Indian staff people in India.
Wow.
One of the great things that's happened now is that we've gotten to the point now that we have regional directors. Most of them are in the States. Then we have some country directors and area directors. And so that's a wonderful thing. Swahili goes very well in Africa. It's one of those things where you sort of wonder, how in the world did all this stuff happen all at once? And the answer is just it didn't happen all at once, but it's like a snowball going down the hill. People hear about it. I can give you another example. I think the secret sauce for Thirdmill is that we don't do all of this by ourselves. We don't do it all directly. So if you're thinking like in terms of business, if you're producing something, you're going to distribute it, you get distribution channels. That's some people anyway use that language. So we have various distribution channels. One channel is we do it ourselves. We open up and we go into a place and start the learning communities for church leaders. But that's very small compared to what else happens. We work with denominations. And this is especially true if you're dealing with Anglicans and people like that, because if you get an archbishop on your side, you win.
Yeah.
In a big way. So just last year, toward the beginning of this year, the Archbishop of South Sudan went on national television and made an announcement on their NBC. It's like their national broadcast network, okay? Mm-hmm. And the announcement was to the whole country that if you want to be an Anglican pastor, you must take 1 year of Thirdmill's curriculum.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
So immediately then you get the whole nation, you see.
That's right.
Yeah. Another archbishop in India did something similar. I remember talking with him, and I said, well, tell me, how many pastors do you have that don't have any education? He said, about 20,000. And so what's happening in my head is I'm going, okay, what percentage of those would want to do this? How much is it going to cost? How much time is it going to take to get this into Hindi and Telugu and things like that? And I said, well, okay, so you're saying about 2,000 students then, right? He said, no. I said, I have 20,000 pastors. I said, okay, then 20%, 4,000. He said, no. I said, I have 20,000. I said, well, how can you be sure all 20,000 are going to want to do this? And he took his glasses off and he looked at me and he said, Richard, I'm the archbishop. I said to him, I'm
the man.
It must be good to be a god. He said, yeah, it is. We have lots of those in India, and I'm one of the good ones. So there in one afternoon, you get the promise of 20,000 students. And then they supervise the students, not us.
Wow, it's amazing.
So we have denominations that do that kind of thing. We have independent ministries that do this. We have television and radio networks that do this. We have academic environments, university. Yesterday, I was with the president of a large university in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and they require all of their students to go through the Thirdmill curriculum. It's just, even if they're going to be doctors. And I said, why do you do that? He said, because I want the doctors to understand that they have a spiritual role when they go out to the villages of the Congo.
Yeah.
Because people look to them not just to give them an aspirin. They look to them, advise me, tell me what life is.
Right.
Why is my mother dying? Why did my child die? And he said they need to know what to be able to say. And he said that's what Thirdmill is for us. So it's things like that that go on. And those are things that have happened just in this last year or so.
Looking forward then in 2000, just 1 year in 2025, what would you say, by or some of the goals or targets or want-to-haves, nice-to-haves that would happen in 25?
Right. One of the big targets that's always out there is more languages. The demand is unbelievable. I mean, people will write
Yeah.
to us and say, "Why aren't you in Portuguese?"
Wow. Yeah.
Okay, and our answer is, "Well, we just haven't been able to get around to it yet."
Yeah.
Or another one would say, "Well, why aren't you in language number 19 in India?" Okay, for example,
Yeah.
because we're only in Telugu and Hindi. Well, you have to make choices, unfortunately. So new languages are always out there. We're in the process, for example, we're about halfway through, I think it is, of working the curriculum, translating the curriculum and distributing it now in Iran, in Farsi. Okay, and so that's always a big demand. Is
Wow.
why don't you have this in our language? And so, well, you know the answer to that. It's fairly simple. We've got the know-how. I mean, we've been doing this for 27 years.
Yeah.
So we've got the know-how. And no, I'm afraid to say AI can't fix that problem yet.
Right.
Maybe one day it will. But
how are you able to, or what's it like trying to penetrate into what would historically be considered closed countries or Muslim countries, or the 1040 window?
right.
You know, how about that?
An example would be Iran. That's
Yeah.
okay.
That's what made me ask the question.
Yeah, right. We do it surreptitiously. We do it underground. We don't do anything at Thirdmill online but we don't also do offline. Okay. So our curriculum can be put on micro SD cards that are about the size of my little fingernail right there.
Yeah.
So that can't even be detected by a metal detector. There's so little metal in them.
Wow.
And so all you've got to have is get one of them into a country and they will duplicate it.
Wow.
I mean, that's the main way we are used in China now, since the internet's shut down. They've closed all the seminaries in China.
Yeah.
They can't go online safely. So we make it available by means of these micro SD cards.
Wow.
And, same thing's true for example, in Iran. They're smuggled in, basically.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, going out a little further, let's say by 2030, which is, I'll be 70. I can't believe that.
Yeah. I'll be dead, brother.
I'll be right behind you or in front of you. What do you see for the next 5 years for Thirdmill?
Yeah, the next 5 years for Thirdmill is to continue to expand, like I said, the languages. Also, that means more countries, 176 countries. Remember, Miss Jenny said all of them, so that's not all of them. Okay,
we got more than 170. I thought we had about 150. We got some more countries now.
Yeah, it's about, but the UN. You just have to use UN numbers, and that changes about every other week. And countries and territories, okay, and protectorates. Okay, that's sort of the way you have to think about it.
Well, our next leader may reduce that number because he's in acquisition mode.
Right? Is Greenland going to disappear? I don't think so. Okay,
he's going to acquire. Have a leveraged buyout of Canada and Greenland and Mexico, or who knows what he's going to acquire.
To say this is a little known fact that Thirdmill, to our knowledge, is the only Christian educational ministry for Christian leaders that is in literally every continent, including Antarctica.
Wow.
Yeah, we have, if you've seen those little cartoons, Happy Feet.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we have Happy Jesus Feet in Antarctica.
That's amazing.
We're there in some scientific research centers.
Yeah, on every continent, every country. Yeah. Not every country. How many countries are there? Do they think there are?
92, I think, is the count today.
So we got a few more left. And
we got a
few.
And
languages, I think they're like 10,000 languages.
Yeah, there are bunches of languages. What you do is you concentrate on what linguists call gateway languages, which are a language that has a lot of people speak it as their second language. Mm-hmm. And then they can carry it over into their language. So Spanish, for example, in Peru, right up in the mountains, they speak Quechuan. And so, but there are people who are bilingual, so they learn us in Spanish and then they teach it in Quechuan up in the mountains. Yeah, that kind of thing. English is one of those gateway languages. Russian, French, Spanish. I mean, there are about 50 of them. Depends on who you ask. 50.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So the goal would be right at 51, 52 languages that we've got to do if we're going to if we're going to be in a position to reach them all.
And you've got to find somebody who can speak that language.
Yes, and who knows the Bible.
Yeah.
And who knows theology.
Wow, and get it to translate accurately.
Uh-huh. And you
Wow.
can do where you do work some now in AI, but the AI translation always has to be curated by human beings,
Sure.
always,
Yeah.
because fortunately maybe, but unfortunately as well, computers don't know technical theology, and they don't know
Yeah.
a whole lot about the Bible.
Yeah.
Okay, and AI doesn't, and so you have to really watch it. You can't just stick it in the machine and let it roll.
Now, as talented as you are, I'm sure you don't do all this by yourself. So you've got a
Yeah.
team of people that help you.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your team.
Well, we have 76 full-time people.
Wow. Okay.
And then we have about 21, 22, depends on what day of the week it is, volunteers, significant people that volunteer significant amounts of time, both in the States and outside the States.
Mm-hmm.
In our office in Orlando, though, because we're so spread out now, in our office in Orlando, if you had everyone come in, you might have 30 people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so that's a glorious thing, actually, as far as we're concerned, because we don't want this to be Orlando, Florida to the world. That's not the vision. We're creating what we call the Thirdmill Global Network, which is trying to embrace and sort of make it a multi-centered system.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the things that's unusual about our curriculum is that we have over 450 professors that appear in our videos.
Wow. 450. Okay. Yeah.
450, and they're from all over the world. Okay, so you'll be watching one lesson, and you'll see someone speaking English, and then for about 2 minutes or 3 minutes, because you can only let a professor be on camera for about 2 minutes, right? Because there's nothing more boring than a professor, except a professor on video. So you have to be really careful not to let them be there too much, okay? And so you'll see one doing that in English. The next thing you know, the next guy might be doing it in Arabic.
Wow. Okay.
The next guy might be doing it in Chinese. Now, we'll translate all those for whatever the target audience is.
Right.
It's multi-ethnic, it's multinational, it's multilingual, this faculty is.
Yeah.
And, as strange as this may sound, it's multi-denominational.
Yeah. Tell me about that, because I think on your website, and we talk about team, but you collaborate with many different mission organizations around the world. I think on your website it said like 600.
Yeah,
Something like that. Yeah. So what does that look like?
And growing.
Yeah.
Well, what's so wonderful about this, and I thought it could be done. Okay, I thought this could happen. Now I could just tell you right up front, I'm a Presbyterian minister. Okay, and Mama didn't birth no fool. I'm not going to do anything that's going to get me in trouble with my church. Okay, it's really that simple. That's how selfish I am. At least I'm not going to do it on purpose, right?
Right.
Okay, so the curriculum that we have, people say, well, what's the theology? And I say, well, it's oriented toward Presbyterian kind of beliefs and that kind of thing. It is. And if you are in that vein or you're aware of it, you'll see it and you'll go, oh, I see why they've got the Heidelberg Catechism up there on the screen. Yeah. Get it, okay?
Yeah.
But if you're not familiar, we're not trying to push it down anybody's throats. So we make sure that if there have been long-standing differences among evangelical Christians, then we let people from various points of view represent their points of view. Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean that I necessarily agree with them all, and we'll try to walk our way through the pros and cons in the narration of the lesson. But at the same time, we just feel that it's very important for us to realize something. I think this is just a reality. There's no reason for us in this part of the world to repeat out there in Asia, Africa, Latin America, the divisions that we have caused among ourselves.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, and even in our country, it's time for us to figure out how to start standing with each other.
That's the truth.
Much as we possibly can.
That's the truth.
If we can't figure that one out, man, we are in deep trouble.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's just important for us to do that. And so what we want people to be able to do, we'd love to have multiple denomination students. In fact, always love this when it happens, growing together, studying together, not to convert each other from, say, a Baptist to a Presbyterian or something crazy like that, or a Presbyterian to Baptist, something crazy like that. That's not the goal. If that happens, it happens. Okay.
Yeah.
But rather to learn how to respect each other in those secondary issues.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's often Christians have a hard time doing.
What have I not asked you today that I should have asked you that
Yeah.
you want to get into
Oh, my.
without taking us through a whole course?
Yeah. 30 seconds or less. Well, one of the challenges we have is convincing traditional schools to take up the cause along with us.
Yeah.
12 million is a lot of people to reach.
Right.
And so long as we're the only ones in the game in any massive way, and there are plenty of people doing mission work and are reaching church leaders. Don't misunderstand me. Many of them are partners of ours. There are plenty of them out there, and we adore them and think that they're magnificent. But on a massive scale, no, not so many.
Mm-hmm.
And what I try to do is I try nicely and gingerly to encourage schools, well-established schools, to take up the cause.
Right.
It can be done. That's what we have proven. It needs to be. We have proven it needs to be done. There's the problem.
Yeah.
The solution is we've proven through these 27 years it can be done.
Right.
Okay, and the benefit of the body of Christ for the body of Christ around the world is astronomical.
Yeah.
And let me just put it to you this way: all of us at one time or another probably have had pastors that have messed up our lives in one way or another, okay? Because they're just people too, right? With all the education they have, they still mess up stuff. Okay, so it just happens. Well, with all the education, that's what happens with us and our pastors. Can you imagine how they would mess you up if they had had less than 1 hour of training in the Bible?
Wow. Yeah. I don't know how they could do it. I really don't.
Crazy things they would teach you.
Yeah.
The immorality that would creep into the church.
Yeah.
So on and so on. The list is very long.
Yeah.
And that, unfortunately, is what's going on out there by widespread in the body of Christ today. And so there's a great need for others to join with us. And we would love it if somebody said, hey, we'll take 1 million in this part of the world and we'll do it. We'll say that's great because that's 1 less million that we have to do in that part of the world.
Yeah.
So that's really our open-handed attitude.
Well, I've been interested in missions since I was a little boy. When we had people come from wherever to speak at my church, my ears would perk up. And now, I'm a business guy, so I think in terms of ROI, return on investment, and everything that I do, every dollar that I spend and every dollar coming in, I can't think of a better return. Of course, you can't measure spirituality and spiritual growth that way. However, I can't think of a better return on investment than for somebody to participate or get involved with Thirdmill and to try to help promote that education and training around the world. Speaking of which, how would somebody get involved with Thirdmill?
Well, if they want to be involved, they can be involved in a number of ways. They can help us distribute, like if your church is going out there on a short-term mission trip, which happens a lot. You can take Thirdmill along with you in your back pocket. You see some church leader and say, hey, have you got a phone that can use this? And many of them do. Or have you got a computer at home that can use this? Take a look at it and just see what you think. And we can give those to you. We can help you out with it. We can even help you get them into it and that sort of thing. Another way, of course, you can do, which is just as important to us, if not more important to us, is that there's a lot of opposition to what we do.
Mm-hmm. I bet.
Spiritual opposition. There's persecution. We have our students, for example, in India, who are beaten by the neighbors with sticks when they leave the room where they've been studying.
Wow.
Okay, the police won't do anything to protect them. They come out, they have to go through the gauntlet. And we have one student who is in prison that we know of. So I'm sure there's more, but that's just the one that we know in China. So there's a lot of prayer that needs to go into this, that the technology will work, that everything will be smooth, and that the Lord won't allow division to come among us. So far, so good. The Lord's really blessed us with good people who know how to get along and to work hard at it. It's never easy. And of course, there's a third way, and it's just normal for me to say this to people, but it's true. the financial ROI on this is enormous, as you said.
Absolutely.
It actually is. It is. And I wish I could say, now, I'm not really telling you the truth about Thirdmill. I'm covering up all the problems. Not.
Yeah.
I'm just sort of telling you the way it actually is. And that, humanly speaking, not actually, but humanly speaking, the only thing that holds Thirdmill back from reaching its goals is we need cash flow.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's not a very high cash flow. Our annual operating budget is $6.5 million. Now, that's a lot of money to me personally, but when you realize that most seminaries in this country that graduate less than, say, 200, 250 people a year, that their operating budgets are 18 million, 18
Wow.
to 20 million.
Yeah.
Low end is 15.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a high ROI on this, and we could use help on a financial basis.
Well, anybody listening to this, you can go to thirdmill.org. That's the website. I'm sure there's a newsletter you can sign up for somewhere on there. I don't know that, but I'm sure there is.
Yeah.
And you can get more information about it. But I encourage you to go to thirdmill.org, learn more about Third Millennium Ministry, and get the newsletter, read about it, get connected. And just do that. So,
Yeah.
Richard, I want to thank you so much for coming. Such a pleasure talking with you. Glad we got to work the technology out. Thank you, James, my son, for working out the technology for us. And look forward to having you. Huh?
This was our third try, wasn't it?
I think the second one, maybe the third one. I lost count. Okay. Well, we finally got it done. I'll tell you a story about that at some point later on. But yeah, thank you so much for coming.
You are welcome, and thank you for the opportunity.